There is a picture almost everyone has seen without knowing what it is. A ruined palace at night. A young woman in the dark with a scroll in her hand. A warrior with his sword half drawn. And above them both, through the broken roof, a skeleton the size of a temple. If you have played a Japanese game, you have met it. Most of the world calls it Gashadokuro, the giant assembled out of the unburied dead, and calls it ancient. It is not ancient. That name is about 60 years old. But the picture is real, and the war behind it was real. It began when a warrior told the Emperor of Japan that the East no longer needed him. Let me give you the true thing under the famous thing. Before the story, 3 things the picture assumes you already know. The man at the bottom of it, Taira no Masakado, did not stay a defeated rebel. He became one of Japan's angry dead, a spirit important enough that people spent centuries keeping him calm instead of letting him be forgotten. His grave is in Tokyo. I will take you to it at the end. Then there is the hour of the ox, 2 in the morning. In Japan, that hour still carries a meaning. It is when you go to a shrine because what you have come to ask for is not a blessing. And sorcery here is not a gesture, it is read. It lives in written characters, on paper, and whoever holds the right sheet of paper holds what it can call up. So look at the picture again. The woman is holding a scroll. That is not a costume, that is the weapon. This is not one story. It is 4 layers stacked on each other, and I will show you the seams as we go. The rebellion at the bottom is history. The sorceress on top of it is in no record at all. A novel of 1806 invented her, the kabuki stage gave her the scene everyone remembers, and later tellers rebuilt the rest. What you are about to hear is all of it at once, which is what Japan actually remembers. I am a Japanese storyteller, and I return to the Japanese sources to bring their words and their world into English, with some moments dramatized for a modern audience. Late in the year 939, the 8 provinces of the East stopped answering to Kyoto. The man who took them was Taira no Masakado, himself a 5th-generation descendant of an emperor. He had begun with a family quarrel over land. He won that, and then everything after it. Governors abandoned their offices and ran, and within months, all 8 were his. And then he did the thing nobody had done. He took a title, Shinno, the new emperor. There was already an emperor in Kyoto. Masakado's answer to that was, not here. Somewhere in the eastern marshes, he began laying out a court of his own, in imitation of the imperial one, and appointed his own officials to stand in it. First Seam. The record of his rebellion calls the site Teinan, and nobody can now say where Teinan was. Later tellers put it at Soma, and Soma is where the rest of the story happens. The court did what courts do. It offered rank and land to any man who would go east and end him. 2 took the offer, Fujiwara no Hidesato and Taira no Sadamori, Masakado's own cousin. They met him in the 2nd month of 940. He had the smaller army that day, and for a while it did not matter because he had the wind. Then the wind turned. In the fighting after that, an arrow struck him. The record does not say who loosed it. It calls it a divine arrow. His head was carried west and put on public display in the capital because that is what was done with rebels. And here the records end and the tellers take over. They say the head would not stay, that one night it lifted off the post and went east, over the mountains, and came down in a village of reeds and fishermen on ground that 1,000 years later would be the middle of Tokyo. The sky went dark at noon, they say, and the earth made a sound, and the villagers buried what had fallen and raised a mound over it. Masakado had children. What became of them is barely recorded. The tellers wanted a different daughter. Second seam, and a wide one. The novel of 1806 sent her to a mountain for 100 days and gave her a brother who got his sorcery from a toad spirit. Almost nobody tells it that way now. This is what replaced it. In it, her name is Satsuki. She wakes up one morning as the child of the most hated name in Japan, in a house that no longer has a roof, in a province where every adult who might have protected her is dead or has changed sides. She does not hide. She walks to Kyoto, the city that killed her father, and climbs to a shrine above the water at Kifune. And she goes at the hour of the ox. She went for 21 nights. On the 21st, something answered. Not the gentle face of the god of Kifune, but the fierce one. And what it handed her was not comfort, and not justice. It was sorcery. The girl who came down that mountain never used her own name again. She took the one Japan remembers, Takiyasha. Taki, a waterfall. Yasha, from the Sanskrit yaksha, a fierce spirit that English usually flattens to demon. She went east, to the ruin of her father's copied court, and began to gather men. Broken soldiers from a lost army. Outlaws with nowhere left to be. Anyone with a reason to hate the capital, which in the east was almost everyone. And travelers began coming back with the same sentence. Something is living in the old palace at Soma. Kyoto sent one man east to find out. His name was Oya no Taro Mitsukuni. He reached Soma at dusk, and what he found was not a fortress. It was a copy of a court, with the marsh growing up through it, grass standing in the floorboards, blinds hanging in strips, a gate built to be admired by officials, opening onto nothing but reeds, and in one room, a light. A woman came out to meet him, young, composed, beautifully dressed for a house with no roof. She apologized for the state of the place, offered him wine, told him she was the daughter of a family that had lost everything to the capital, and asked, politely, what had brought a man of his quality so far east. Third seam, and this is the one the stage built. What happens in this room is the reason the story survived 200 years. And it is not in the novel. It is kabuki. Mitsukuni did not draw his sword. He let her think she had won him. He warmed to her, drank with her, played the soldier with no lord who had nothing left in the West. And then, gently, as a man does when he is filling a silence, he began to talk about the rebellion, about the 8 provinces, about the new emperor, and how the new emperor died. He told it well, and while he told it, he watched her face. She wept. That was all he needed. Nobody wept for Masakado in front of a stranger. Nobody but the one person who could not help it. So Mitsukuni gave her his own name, and the name of the man who had sent him. She did not scream, and she did not run. She reached for the scroll. She read aloud from it, and outside, the ground gave up an army of bones. No record puts bones under that palace. The story puts them there because it wants the war still in the ground. The men nobody came back for, on both sides, waiting under the floor the whole time she was pouring wine. And here the story and the famous picture separate. I will show you exactly where in a moment. In the picture, they come up as one skull, wide as a gate, pushing the roof beams apart. One hand coming down through the ceiling, with the fingers already open. Ribs standing in the dark behind it, like the frame of a burnt building. It does not roar, because it has nothing to roar with. It arrives and looks down and reaches. And the man it is reaching for is standing in a room he cannot get out of. Mitsukuni did not win that night by being stronger than it. Nobody is stronger than that. He won because the thing above him was not alive. It was being held up by a woman reading from a piece of paper. So he went for the woman. The tellers do not agree on what happened to her. In some versions, she dies there in the ruin and goes wherever her father went. In others, she lives and spends the rest of her life in a temple, shaved and in gray, praying for the man whose head flew east. The bones went back down into the field, and they stayed there for 900 years, until a man with a woodblock and a brush went and got them. 3 things about this monster that get lost on the way out of Japan. First, the name. Gashadokuro is not old. Researchers in Japan went looking for the earliest printed use of the word, and the earliest anyone has found so far is not in a scroll or a temple record. It is in a girls' comic magazine, November 1966, in an article about yokai by a science writer named Saito Morihiro. Gasha is not a word for a rattle. It is the sound itself, gasha, gasha, the clatter of bones knocking together. And by Saito's own later account, one thing behind it was not Japanese at all. The clattering black night of Glamis Castle in Scotland, which had run in another Japanese magazine the year before. In Japan, people who study yokai treat Gashadokuro as a modern creation. Outside Japan, it is usually sold as 1,000 years old. Second, the picture, which really is old. It was cut by Utagawa Kuniyoshi around 1845, 3 sheets wide, from that novel of 1806. And in the novel, Takayasha does not raise one giant. She raises hundreds of human-sized skeletons, and they split into 2 armies and fight each other. Kuniyoshi compressed all of them into one, and there is a reason his looks so convincing. Scholars have suggested he may have been working from anatomical drawings that reached Japan through the Dutch trade, European medical plates. If that is right, the most famous monster picture in Japan borrowed its skeleton from a textbook. Third, the daughter. The sorceress is a storyteller's gift, but a Buddhist history completed in 1322, the Genko Shakusho, names another, Nyozoni, called Masakado's 3rd daughter. It says she became a nun and gave herself to Jizo, the bodhisattva who goes down into hell after people. It does not say she spent her life praying for her father. Later memory added that. The tellers gave one daughter sorcery. The older book gave the other one a temple. Japan kept both. And her father's head? Go to Otemachi in Tokyo. Banks, towers, some of the most expensive ground on earth. His memorial is still on the ground it has always been on, though the mound itself was taken apart and put back when the ministry rebuilt after the 1923 earthquake. The deaths that followed were remembered as his anger. Today, a preservation society and the companies around it keep the place clean, and there are always fresh flowers. A rebel's grave, tended by the financial district, 1,086 years later. That is the part of this story that is not a story. Next time, a farmer pulls an arrow from a wounded crane and lets it go. Soon after, a woman he has never met asks to become his wife and weaves cloth that should not exist on one condition: he must never look into the room while she works. If you want these stories the way Japan tells them, subscribe.